All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's the Commissioners Board Briefing. It's July 22nd, 2026. Today we have a few topics of discussion and direction. The first discussion is going to be from Sarah Absher. Actually, three of them, all three of them from Sarah Absher. The first one will be the Friends of PC Airport update. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for being able to visit with you today. Joining me for this first conversation is Robin Holdman and David Inman from the Friends of Pacific City Airport, and they are both online. They know we do have a tight schedule today and other obligations, so we are going to do our best to be brief. But what we wanted to do was share with you the conversations that the Friends of the Pacific City Airport have had with ODAV recently. And we felt the context of this quick conversation today would help provide additional layers of information as we walk into that conversation with ODAV next week. Specifically, as you are aware, there is a cause and effect between permitting and airport operation. ODAV historically has expressed concerns about shutting down the airport or not improving the airport in response to permitting or other activities that have occurred around the airport itself. And the most recent correspondence, Robin and David can share with you, came from ODAV to the Friends of the Pacific City Airport on May 28th, where they received an email that is in relation to the $1.3 million that ODAV has recently earmarked for upgrades and improvements to the Pacific City Airport. You do not have a copy of this email, but I'll just read you the statement. It was an email from ODAV, just simply saying that they have tremendous maintenance and operational needs with very little funding for all 28 state airports. If the airport, meaning the Pacific City Airport, continues to be encroached, ODAV will need to decide whether it is prudent to spend such a significant amount of money on improvements at an airport that is becoming less and less safe. This does not mean we have already made that decision, and it does not mean it would require the immediate closing of the airport. It is simply a value and cost-effective approach to managing and maintaining our system of airports. Following this email, the Friends of Pacific City Airport met with ODAV. And so just to kind of set the table of what we would like to share with you for updates walking into next week's meeting, I would love to turn the floor over to Robin and David to share more.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, I'm Robin Holdman. I live in Sisters, Oregon, but I purchased a second home in Pacific City in 2011. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you very much. And my husband's a pilot, and we have a vested interest in that airport as property owners and have developed strong relationships there. And I just want to step back just for a minute to explain why our organization exists. Through time, and you can ask Bob and Sally Rissell now, it has not been uncommon that the airport be considered for closure or sale because it is a narrow and a short airport. And the thing that has been hard for us is that these decisions are made quietly without community input. And as you well know, this airport is critical to South County for efforts by the Coast Guard and also emergency evacuation, health purposes, life flight. And also there is significant use of the airport in the summer months. It's the 5th most used state airport in the system of 28 airports. And the FAA safety briefing declared it one of 8 national treasures. This is a very important airport. So anyway, we find that about every 5 years, the agency feels that it should be closed. And a group of us in 2017 went through the process with the support of Senator Johnson and Representative Gomberg to start a nonprofit. And Commissioner Josie, we formed a nonprofit, and we are 501c3 status so that we have legal standing. We have actually an official MOU with the state to help them with maintenance, to pursue funding, to be advocates. So we take a vested interest in any type of decision that is made for that airport. And we are very disheartened when things are made very quickly because of budgetary issues. So reflecting back to that invitation on May 28th to meet with the director and the state airport manager, Dave and Sally Gristle and I met with Kenji and Tony, and we're told right up front that because of the land use permit that had been approved, but then rescinded, there were just the concerns that the airport was becoming more unsafe. And so the agency had spoken to their Department of Justice representative about what were ramifications and options. The first one they brought up was that the airport could be closed to reduce their liability. The next that they brought up was that perhaps we could sell it to the county or to the port. And in doing so, that entity would not have the liability like the state. Dave and I reminded them that this had been considered back in 2018, that the county did not have the funds, the port had no interest, and that there had been this process when the state decided to sell it as surplus, which to me is bizarre because it's not surplus property, but that's how the state laws are. And so going through that process, no one responded to the request for information except our nonprofit. And the result of that was that the board at that time rescinded the sale and said we could be partners in the management and approve that MOU with us. And so in the discussion of the options then at this June meeting, they said, well, maybe we could sell it. We talked with them about the discrepancy between the county's 100-foot setback and 125-foot setback. And we said the majority of homes have been built. There's few vacant lots. It doesn't make sense to force those people who want to build to observe the state's setback, which is the FAA setback, and Dave will talk about this. We talked about if there was any legislative possibility where we could involve Representative Javidi and Senator Weber to do something to protect this airport at the base of setback of 100 feet and to reduce the liability because it's an important asset to South Tillamook County. They asked, they being the state airport group, if we could help them come up with the money to purchase any of the vacant lots so that they could be left bare, or if we could help them purchase homes as they came up for sale so that there could be additional setbacks created. They don't have the money to do that. They wanted us to come up with the money somehow. We immediately then began reaching out to coastal legislators to seek their assistance with a potential legislative option. So that's what we've been working on. However, on July 9th, during the most recent Department of Aviation board meeting, the staff announced that there is a projected $3 million agency budget shortfall. And so as the board members were considering options, one of the first things they thought of was to take back the SOAR money that they had approved at their April board meeting, which is $1.5 million for the airport repair of the damaged drainage system, to build a public access road, because currently the emergency and safety vehicles have to trespass across private property. and then to expand the parking because that airport is getting very highly used. So they had approved that in April. But as they're struggling to fill their budget, they wondered if they could take that money back and use it to fill staff and administrative overhead. The staff said that was likely not possible. So then one of the board members said, well, you know what? I think we should take that money back anyway, because it's a waste of money to spend it on an unsafe airport. And so let's take it back and put it towards other state airports. We found out about this and immediately responded with a letter to the state saying that we have legal standing and with our MOU, and we would like to be included in any future conversation about how that money is redirected, if at all, and that the community needs to have impact, have a say in that because it significantly impacts the safety of that community and the flooding on Rupel Avenue. So at this point, we have been told by the state airport manager, they do already have their consultant engineers ready to continue on the timeline to go out to bid and to do something in spring 27. However, the board has to give its authorization for that money to be used. And they'll be meeting in September. And the staff is to provide additional information on the airport, why the funding is important, and if the money was redirected, where it would go. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding. And Dave here has done significant research on the FAA and land use and is happy to share that with you. Dave?
So
You gotta
Dave,
unmute,
you do
Dave.
need to mute yourself. And I would say that those are pieces that we will walk through next week and with county council, meaning Mr. Leibel and Mr. Kearns as well. So.
Okay, I'll go along. You can call me Dave. I'm part of the Friends group like Robin. I guess the problem I have is with ODAV's position on safety. It asserts that compliance issues make the airport unsafe, but the only objective airport-specific evidence is from the National Transportation Safety Board, and it reports there are no fatalities associated with the airport's operation over 65 years. So our best objective evidence says the airport is quite safe. It's top-notch, as good as anything in the rest of the state. In addition, the state's position is a little inconsistent because in 1979 and 2012, ODAV participated in the permitting and approval of a sewage pump at the north end of the runway. This is only 50 feet from the runway centerline, and Robin described the 100-foot typical boundary. So it is, in fact, the biggest obstruction. Yet, since 1979, there's no accidents or fatalities associated with that facility at all. Meanwhile, ODAV, it's what it wants to satisfy compliance issues will make that house that would have been built 100 foot back limited to 4 foot 1 inch in height. Now, traditionally, the houses were kept to under 35 feet, and that with that 100-foot setback from the runway centerline. In that time period, since 1979 till now, some safety issues have been ignored. The drainage system is a safety issue because soft ground next to a runway is difficult. If a pilot should stray and get a wheel into the soft ground, it will pull the airplane from the runway and cause an accident. And in addition, because of the layout of that particular property, the drainage system, when it's failed, makes a duck pond beside the runway, and waterfowl strikes are risky. And we notified ODAV of this problem in 2017 or 18, I can't remember which. So they've known quite a long time. We also notified them that the taxiways are too narrow. So imagine a parking lot and you've nosed into some parking spot and a car wants to go behind you. Well, this isn't possible in the Pacific City Airport because it's too narrow. And that forces an airplane to put its wheel or wheels into soft ground, and this can cause damage to aircraft. Lastly, the emergency vehicle situation Robin outlined pretty clearly, but that's a big deal. We regularly see emergency flights in and out of Pacific City Airport. Should private property owners block their access for whatever reason or just simply want to gate it, there would be no access for the emergency vehicles. Now, that property that the ODAV bought several years ago remains unimproved, but its purpose was to supply emergency vehicles access as well as pilots doing transient pickups and so forth of passengers could be done through that property. But nothing's happened on that. So lastly, I would like to cover the actual liability the state has. The state in its years ODAV has only had to pay 2 lawsuits. One was a whistleblower claim and another was a land use planning problem. None were about airport operations, landings and takeoffs. So the absence of any payouts is evidence that their liability on this whole thing is very low. And I think they're making too much of that point and it really doesn't stand to reason. So what we ask is that risks specific to the airport be weighed and balanced with the benefits provided to the community. And most importantly, that property owners' rights be honored. It's only through this mutual cooperation of the airport and its community around it that the airport is thriving and it's such a gem. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Robin and David did send me an email earlier today, and copies of that email and attachments are in front of you. So the other thing about the permitting of the airport improvements that they mentioned, including the actual safety issues that exist, the drainage, the ponding, the airport is in the floodway. And so one thing that the department did, was we worked with the Friends of Pacific City Airport to get permitting done before that December 1st pick'em deadline to get their permits in, because the other interesting piece of this that kind of overshadows the rest of the situation is if these improvements do not get done, which are critically needed, that grant money is potentially still on the table for, I don't know if I can permit those improvements in the future. So there's a lot of connecting pieces to this situation. And again, we just thought it would be very helpful for you to have this information walking into that conversation with ODAV next week. And just want to thank Robin and David for taking the time today to join me to visit with you.
Great. Good question.
I don't at this time. There's a lot of information, and I think sitting with ODAV, there will be more questions, no doubt. And certainly I have questions for legal counsel about how all this plays together, but I don't know that that's the conversation we're ready to have today.
Appreciate that.
Likewise, I want to thank Robin and David for joining us, and this is helpful. Thank you. And I've looked at this timeline beginning in the 20s. This is great. Thank you for putting this together and sharing it with us. So I will be interested to learn more.
Yep, and I concur, and there's a lot of moving parts here, and I do appreciate the time you both spent presenting to us today. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me address you. That's really great.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And
All
thank
right.
you for your past support with transient lodging tax. That helped to pay for one of the initial analysis studies for the drainage system. So it was the seed money to get things going. Thank you.
That's great.
You're welcome. Okay,
Next topic.
next topic of discussion
Perfect.
is the HPSF award.
Yes, thank you. I prepared a memo, sent it to you like yesterday afternoon, and did include copies there for you, just in case you have not had a chance to look at it yet. This is regarding the Housing Production Solutions Award recommendation from the Tillamook County Housing Commission or the Tillamook Bay Commons Project, which, as we know, is the 72-unit apartments adjacent to the hospital. And the award recommendation from the Housing Commission included a contingency that that the project, be successful in obtaining a moderate income revolving loan fund grant through Tillamook County. And subsequent to that, as we all know, we've decided to put our local efforts into looking into that program on hold until OHCS has finished their process and some of our questions and various moving pieces are resolved. And so the question then became, what do we do with the $80,000 that was earmarked and recommended by the Housing Commission for this project? And part of the Housing Commission's recommendations was that if this project was unable to obtain that contingency, that the funds be awarded to other Housing Production Solutions Fund eligible projects. Since then, the Housing Commission has been unable to reach consensus as to whether or not the contingency for this project and this award be removed. And part of that conversation with the Housing Commission was direction for myself and the Finance Committee to continue to review the applicant's pro forma, which is essentially an outline of their funding stack for the project. And because Merle could no longer be factored into their pro forma, they had to provide the Finance Committee with an updated pro forma. And that pro forma ended up raising more questions than answering questions that we had before. And part of the challenge with that was the way that the Housing Production Solutions Fund review process is set up is applicants submit their application, staff work with the applicants to get the application to the Finance Committee for review. There's a presentation before the Housing Commission on all of the various applications and projects. And then eventually they go back, they do their work, and then those recommendations come to the board for awards. And there's not really a lot of back and forth with the applicants once that presentation portion of the process occurs. And so working with the Finance Committee, obtaining additional information from the applicant was a bit of a tricky process because it went outside of what our usual process has been. And so trying to be mindful of that change, but also trying to figure out, should this money really be awarded for this project? 72 units is a lot of units for Tillamook. And so continue to work with the developer and the Finance Committee. And you have a memorandum here from the Finance Committee. Unfortunately, there were two actual options to recommend to the board. And one of them was not included in the memorandum, but I included it in the Finance Committee memo, but I included it in the staff memo. The Finance Committee and I met early July after the June Housing Commission meeting, and really understanding we were stuck. What was agreed upon was the best thing to do was for me to bring this back to the board to figure out what you would like to do with this award and whether the contingency should be removed and the funds awarded anyway, or whether the fund should go to other eligible projects. One of the biggest pieces of the conversation was that in the 4 years that this Housing Production Solutions Fund grant application review process has occurred, there's only been one pre-development loan awarded for a project. And what really struck us during this conversation were projects like the Nehalem Bay Health District. They just received that $25,000 pre-development award. If the Housing Commission limits awards to one-time pre-development award, it could actually end up compromising projects in the future that we understand may need to come back more than once during the pre-development phase. And is it more important to have progress shown in those various phases of the pre-development? Or is it the one-time pre-development award, and then until you get to construction, there's no opportunity for additional funding support? And again, thinking about the Nehalem Bay Health District, that really resonated with all of us in terms of that is a project that if they come back and they continue, would the county be interested in continuing to support that project? And the pro forma ties into that conversation because at a pre-development phase, the pro forma is not as significant and does not carry as much weight as it would in pre-construction and later. Because in the pre-development phase, the pro forma is not solid. Typically, funding stacks are not solidified. And in this case, with Tillamook Bay Commons, the other piece of it was understanding that the developer now has to recreate the funding stack because they will not have Merle. New study, new costs now will be incurred as they work through this new finance endeavor. And so that discussion with the finance committee going back and forth, there were two options for recommendations that came out of the finance committee conversation. The first one was if the project is not pre-development and is pre-construction, with the questions that are still coming from the pro forma, that the funds not be awarded. The second option was to recognize one, pre-development may continue for more than one grant cycle. Ultimately, they have made progress. You can see there in their outline, their brownfield work. We had a meeting with the city to talk about permitting SDCs. And the fact that a new market study is needed. The second option, weighing all of those other pieces that are actually part of the circumstances in the situation that is real time. The second option was to recommend the contingency be removed and the 80,000 be awarded so that they could continue that work, complete their revised funding stack and move forward. In my conversation with the developer following that meeting, and that is the second attachment, which is the email from Mr. Wade, I asked him for more information about the nonprofit that is actually, I would say, the owner of the development. The nonprofit was created from the first award of $100,000 that came from the Housing Production Solutions Fund, the previous grant cycle, and asked him to share additional information about this 501c3 nonprofit for the board to review. With that, I asked for a timeline because I wanted to know exactly where they were at on paper today and what their plans were for the next 6 months and the next year. And that is outlined below as well. And then lastly, the county did support a phase 1 assessment through Brownfield for the hospital. I'll call it the hospital site where the project is going. And they have continued that work with DEQ, and they should at any time be receiving a letter from DEQ that will allow them to move forward. So it's called a letter of comfort, and that allows them to move forward past that phase 2 assessment. They submitted within the last 30 days the additional information that DEQ required to get to that letter. I have not received confirmation that that letter has been received. But in the meantime, with this work, they are working with another branch of DEQ on the CERTA rebate. So they've been having their meetings with DEQ on the energy efficiency components that would go into the construction of the project. So they are eligible for that rebate post-construction. And then lastly, the developer and I met with the city of Tillamook 2 weeks ago, I believe, because one of the other unknowns with the funding stack was whether or not the city of Tillamook would require them to annex into the city upon construction completion. And the city is not requiring them to annex right away, which is great news because that means they can confidently add the county's property tax exemption program into their funding stack moving forward. So all of these things have continued to evolve. I do still feel that there is a level of risk with this project, but considering all of the movement that continues to occur and the potential outcome of this project with 72 units for Tillamook, I am coming before you to recommend option one and to see what your level of comfort is with me proceeding with a grant agreement with council to bring forward at a regular board meeting.
Option one.
Option two, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you.
My apologies. So that's just, wanted to give you that update and do my best to answer any other questions you may have about this project and where it's at. And again, if you're comfortable with me proceeding with drafting a grant agreement, then I'm happy to take those next steps.
Okay. Well, I appreciate, I've been not waist deep in this, but maybe shin deep in this project. And being at the Housing Commission meetings. And I appreciate the work that the Housing Commission and the Finance Committee did with this, the careful and mindful vetting of this. I think it shows just how important a project like this is to us. This has a lot of aspects that makes it important. We need this type of housing here. We need to be using, putting stuff on brownfield sites, like getting those back into the inventory for housing. I've had the benefit of being really involved in this, so I do support your recommendation of option two. I feel like the mineral contingency removal makes sense. It's not developers' fault or the nonprofit's fault that that's no longer on the table. It's also the commission didn't realize it wasn't going to be on the table, so I think they still would have moved towards funded this regardless of that. But I think I'm fully supportive of removing the contingency and going with option two. So
Thank you.
I am also, and I appreciate your work on this and everyone's work on this. I agree with my colleague that this is very important, and people have been talking about that property and wanting to be able to use that property for housing for at least 10 years that I'm aware of, but probably way before that. And this feels like this is as close as we've ever been. And when Merle was still a possibility, we were all for it. So I feel like it's even if there are more hurdles and more steps now because Merle is not in the picture, I feel like I'm not speaking for them, but the county's desire for this to be successful remains.
great.
Yeah, and I would agree with my colleagues. I think the reason that we created a pre-development opportunity at the Housing Commission is that we knew that for many of these, somebody has to be willing to join in the risk. And we knew that for many of these projects, there's zero way they would get off the ground if nobody said, I'm in. Let's see if we can do that. This is a particular unique project. This is, I think, the second one of these 501c3s that has been established in the state of Oregon. It is a newly allowable type of 501c3 to build that middle housing. So, the reward is equal to the risk, I think is where I look at it, is that it is high risk. There is a chance that this funding may not result in these 72 units because there's just so many barriers and so many unknowns. However, there is also a chance that this $80,000 will result in not only these 72 units, but the rest of the 500 units that nonprofit has been set up to provide. So, I acknowledge the risk in here. I acknowledge that we are taking a bit of a leap of faith because it's still so very fluid. But again, I think that's why pre-development funding was identified as an option when we put together the Housing Production Solutions Fund. So I am in support.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, just to put a point on this, I actually was in conversation yesterday with a professional in this community that we as the county interact with on a regular basis. And the apartment that they're living in is getting sold. And they don't know what they're going to do. And so these are the kind of units that these folks need. We talk about the hospital finding a physician and finding staff from no place for them to live. So to me, that just puts another point on it. It is worth the risk because the benefits are there. And that's what this fund was created for, is to kind of do these types of projects. So think you've got your direction.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So I will put a draft agreement together and send that to you and Joel in the coming days. Thank you. And then the last thing on the agenda is regarding the appeal hearings. So just to kind of give you insight on how quickly those 150 days shrink, the application was deemed complete April 17th. Because we have a 28-day public hearing notice requirement, the first hearing was June 25th, which was that first available planning commission hearing after that, that 28-day notice. And then the notice of decision went out July 10th, and our 150th day is September 14th. So it moves a lot, like when you take a step back and look at it, it moves much quicker than we anticipate. So between the fair, I believe the commissioners are out of office the week of September 13th. Melissa and I are also out that week because we have our FEMA conference. Does that sound right? I think there's no availability on the week of the 13th.
Of
We're
September.
all gone.
Yeah, September. Yeah.
The 9th of September, the week before. And okay. So we have very few weeks that are available. The solution that I would propose is that we can shorten the public hearing notice down to 10 days if we hold 2 hearings. The benefit of holding 2 hearings in land use is that the first evidentiary hearing, anyone can request a continuation, which means if we don't have a second hearing date as a backup ready to go, it may put us in jeopardy of not meeting that statutory 150-day timeline. This project is for a property in Neskowin. I would say the community is used to attending board meetings or participating in board activities during the day. And so my proposal would be if there's time on Wednesdays that we hold 2 hearings like you would for a other type of a standard ordinance. And we notice both dates, it shrinks our notification timeline. And if anyone requests a continuation at the first hearing, we've already got that second hearing, which means essentially we just leave the record open. There's no deliberation. Public comment would be taken again at that second hearing, but it insulates us from having to do gymnastics around a very short timeline and try to get everybody's schedules together. You could technically hold the hearings on any days at any times, but I was thinking if Wednesdays are a day we're all here or during board briefing times, we can definitely make that work.
Are you thinking like August 26th and September 2? Because both hearings need to be before September 14th.
Correct. Let me go ahead and go to my
You
calendar.
hear that?
I'm out the week of the 9th.
Okay,
Okay.
and 2, I think we all want.
And I mean, the reality, I know how much you all understand the importance of these land use hearings, and we as staff really appreciate that. But technically, also, I just need quorum. So if
Right.
we have 2, so I would say however that works out, it's always wonderful to have all 3 of you, but quorum works too.
I would want to defer to staff on this as far as the legality of doing it this way, and then also what you think of availability for those days.
Yeah, I think Sarah's already vetted the legality of it. The calendar is when your availability, and I defer to her on whether she needs 2 or 3 of you.
Okay.
So we could work on a schedule for Wednesdays, just we know what days everybody's out. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I will work with Melissa. We will get 2 Wednesdays on the books. And then what were the dates that you said, Commissioner Bell?
I said August 26th and September 2.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy.
We should probably hold 2 weeks in between. So would that be the 19th and then the 2nd?
Good.
Okay.
But then I'm trying to remember your rules and can't, but what I do remember is that there's you have to time the notices, there has to
Mhm.
be a distance of time between the notice and the meeting. Does that give you enough time?
It will, because we've already called the Headlight Herald to see if we could publish later this week. The deadline is today at 4 o'clock. And sometimes they'll give us grace and let us get stuff to them the next day.
Mm.
So we can make that, I think, worst case scenario. Even if it publishes on the 4th or 5th, that 10-day notification timeline would put us on the 19th.
Okay.
So if we did the 19th and the 2nd, and then because the decision has to be final, we would probably try to come prepared with the order on the 2nd.
So you would have a decision on the 2nd.
Correct.
So you're gonna have two commissioners, just,
Okay.
I don't know if this is contentious or not, but, because Paul's out.
Oh, okay.
On this, on the second, I can be, I am out of town, but I can possibly be remote if that,
And the 9th doesn't work. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
does mine say no remote?
Yours is vacation, the 1st through the 15th, not available the 2nd, remote the 9th.
The opposite? Or not?
Yeah, that is correct.
And that is not on this last calendar, so we're trying to,
Okay.
hers isn't, so.
What about the 12th and the 26th?
Yeah, the second is.
Holy. No, top's not up. I don't want to destroy anybody here, but the convertible's got the top down.
The 12th is the 12th the fair, the week of fair. It's the week.
They are all three here on the 12th.
So could we do the 12th and the 26th potentially?
August 12th?
Mhm.
August 12th and August 26th, those look to be all open
Okay.
for all three at
So-
this time.
Okay, so I will rush back now, make sure if we can get the notice to the Headlight Herald tomorrow. We will meet the 10 days to do the 12th and the 26th. The worst case scenario, we do the 19th and the 2nd. Okay. And then we'll work on the ins and outs of the legal proceedings and if, making sure the records are left open at least 7 days if it needs to be. And I'll walk you through, we can walk through that part together once we get everything noticed.
Wow.
Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.
Can we go back just for a minute to the Friends of the PC Airport?
Yes.
And just give us a little more context about the meeting next week and,
Mhm.
I mean, I think I understand the issues, but what will be asked of the board in this meeting with ODEF?
Thank you. I don't think anything will be asked this first meeting. I think what the meeting is next week is an education piece and a conversation piece. And it will take off where we left off last year, where we talked about understanding what ODAV wants to see for setbacks from the runway for development differ from what the county's land use ordinance says. And one of the things that we had talked about last year was how many properties are actually affected by the difference between the two. And that is information that ODAV has provided through Debbie for you all to see. If the airport were privately owned, the challenges with permitting, meaning the county following their codes, building codes to issue permits, would not be an issue for ODAV. The way we permit, not adhering to the setbacks they want us to use, is what's creating this space where they're having these conversations with the friends about, oh, we don't know if we're going to fund you or keep you open. But the other piece is it's just terrible customer service, right? So we have property owners, Mr. Henderson, Lad Henderson was here last year. He was another one. ODAV does not have the regulatory authority to tell us to stop. But if we don't, there's this weird space of if we don't do what they want us to do, then we put the airport and property rights at one or the other at risk. So at some point, something's got to give.
And is the main thing, the 20 feet of setback that you approve 100 and they want 120? Is the 20 feet of setback, is that like the big argument?
It's one of many, but that 25 feet is significant on some of those lots. And, you know, so that's one piece of it. The other thing is the height limits. So height, when you build around the airport, and we have an airport overlay zone, so it's a defined boundary. Building height is not measured from the ground like you see typically elsewhere. It's actually measured from mean sea level.
Interesting.
And so anybody who builds there has to have an elevation certificate because you don't know where mean sea level is. And depending on what I would say space you're in relation to the proximity, the distance of the runway, you have different height limits, right? So it's mean sea level and it's measured differently. And it's not all 35 feet.
That last meeting, we had a really good
Exactly.
graph.
So part of it is the setback of the 25 feet. The other challenge is that structures can't be more than 4 feet high in some areas. And so it just makes properties 4 feet. That's right. And from a permitting perspective, it gets incredibly frustrating when their comments back are no structures greater than 4 feet in height can be approved, you know, or permitted. And it's like, well, that's not, you know, I have to notice them under our ordinance or any development in that overlay zone. Those comments aren't helpful. And in the instance of this most recent permit, it was a pretty assertive push to say, tell me why I need to deny this, on what grounds, because they're not going to be involved in our appeal processes either, right? And they wouldn't say that. And so that's where this awkward space came between council and I trying to figure out what to do with these permits.
I do.
And so there's a lot of issues that can be resolved with a very tough decision of whether or not the airport becomes privatized, it closes down, or it stays. But whatever decision that ends up being, and I don't think that is our decision, but the cause and effect to how we permit and whether or not we change our land use ordinance requirements will ultimately help determine the outcome of one of those three scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It would be helpful to me to know how many properties would be impacted that aren't built yet. I'm assuming we wouldn't be considering changing already built properties.
We would,
You would.
because if anyone wants to do an alteration or a remodel, we still have to notice them and it still comes back. It puts us in this terrible cycle of issues. So what I'll do is I will count the number of properties affected just as a whole, and I'll break out the ones that are vacant.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and I was interested in what Robin was saying about that ODAV had asked the nonprofit group to buy vacant properties. I thought that's interesting. And how many are there? So when you come back to
Yeah.
that, that'll be
Right, because that really gets to the buyout, you know, and if you think about it just visually, if you look at the airport overlay as a whole, that boundary goes down to Twist Wine Company. It goes all the way up Bruton by the hotels or south through the commercial corridor. And where the approach zone is, covers the hardware store. It covers Beach Walk. It covers that vacant property that no one has been able to commercially develop because they're looking at a 4-foot tall building. And then if you go down the river past the hardware store, so heading north, that whole stretch of homes is also in there. So it's my concern is that it's also more than people think, which is why, again, I don't think our role is to decide what happens to the airport, but just being cognizant of whether or not we update our land use ordinances to satisfy what ODAV wants. We have a potential property rights taking issue in one hand, or not changing anything is the cause and effect to what ODAV does moving forward with the airport.
Okay.
And my hope next week is to talk about that and start working towards a solution that everyone can live with. And that's very Pollyannish, and I don't know if we can get there, but
We can hope. We
yeah,
can start the conversation.
yeah. And I appreciate you walking through that with me, because after 14 years of trying to live in this situation and do the right thing, it is becoming increasingly difficult. Something needs to change. I'm just not sure what that is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Appreciate your time today. It's nice to see you all.
I feel like you're.
Spending the afternoon
you're
with
gonna
us.
say something else.
Mhm.
No, it's a complicated issue. I mean, I think we looked at the map with ODAV whenever we met with them a year ago, and it was very hard to get ODAV to agree that, this was their circle. Well, not exactly, because it goes like this and then it goes like that, and it's like, but you can't build anything more than a 4-foot wall in that circle, right? I mean, it's a very legalistic, I think, problem. And nobody wants to be the responsible party for saying no.
That's right.
And so it's really, I think it's complicated in that way. And I felt like our last conversation with ODAB was complicated and not, I didn't feel like we got very far. So I'm trying to think of, what other information, how do we do this? What do we have to know? What has to be different this time? Because the conversation last time was pretty much, it felt like this.
Yeah.
ODEV says, it's not our problem. It's your problem, county. And we're like, yeah, but it's really not our problem. It's your problem, ODEV, about where you want things built and how you want them built. And your refusal to say to us, this is prohibited, because then it's not us with the takings, right? Because ODAV is saying this is prohibited and our land use can lean into that. But that's not, they're not willing to say that. So I guess that's why I say legalistic. I feel like there's a risk management piece here that nobody, we're all trying to push the hot potato somewhere else.
I think it is. I think they see it as a risk management. And that's why they do that.
Mhm.
They're trying to manage risk too,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, but it's their rules.
It totally.
But it's their rules, not our rules. We didn't set these. So I think just as you're talking about what are the vacant properties, well, what are all the properties?
That's right.
And potentially, having our GIS folks just draw a circle and let's figure out the value of the properties inside that entire circle. If we were to give ODAV what they really want, it would be, I think it's worth knowing the value of what it takes to reach ODAV's desired state.
Mhm.
Because ODAV's desired state is all of those undeveloped properties are removed from development, and anything that is developed is never changed. And so if someone, ideally in their world, this would all just go away.
Right. I think they want all of those properties bought out.
Yeah. And so if that's their perfect solution, I think being able to sit at the table with them and say, so we went ahead and just ran the circle and
Yeah.
it's, $12.75 million or 23 million, or whatever it is, right? To empty out the circle.
But I think based on what you said earlier, the board doesn't even want, they're ready to just throw away the airport.
Nobody wants the liability.
I don't even consider that, are they? This is a really frustrating issue.
It is.
The only old, small county airport, are we? I mean, what's happening with other ones?
So that's a good question. I think that is a question that should be asked to ODAV. I know Aurora has some similar characteristics to Pacific City Woods, but I think Pacific City is one of the few airports where you have so much development right adjacent to it. Because if you think about the airports we're familiar with up and down the coast,
Yeah.
Nehalem Bay State Park, there's nothing, right? Lincoln City, I think there's one in Lincoln City, there's nothing. Tillamook, it is the airport. So it is a unique situation. And we met with Representative Javity and tried to figure out if we could relocate the airport. Is there another place
Right.
in South County? And there's nothing that meets the standards to construct a new airport.
Right, that's not in the floodway.
That's not a floodway, that doesn't have the topographical differences, right? I mean, we even looked at Bob Straub State Park and had OPRD part of that conversation because they own a bunch of property down south of that, and it just wasn't, we couldn't find a solution.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's this kind of thing is playing out with everything. Every kind of state agency is dealing with this. I mean, with the buyouts with ODOT that we're dealing with, right? We're just minimizing risk
Mhm.
and also having reduction in funds, and they have this money set aside to replace or to repair or build on this property. They're like, well, we don't want to spend that money. So
Right.
Well, I think the value of knowing what's in that circle that ultimately would have to be removed to meet ODOT's desired state also helps everyone in this conversation understand that if we have to basically back away from ODOT's or ODAV's desired state and the airport folks have to make a decision about whether or not they want to buy the airport,
right.
they need to understand that we're walking away from maybe $1.5 million, but we're walking away from that because we don't have the other however many millions to invest in clearing the way for the airport,
Right.
right? Because I understand, and I'm not just as unsympathetic to the fact that this airport is important to that community, and it is our unincorporated community that we support, and we want to support the economics and the viability of it 100%. But there is a dollar amount that's at stake here on the table that is highly likely to be something we can't even begin to think about touching. Whether it's through buyouts or takings, either way, and so I think the airport people need to have that number in their head as well, because they can buy it, they can run it differently, they
That's
can
right.
keep that vitality. And maybe we're helping them figure out how to raise the maintenance. Maybe we're taking some role, maybe we're not.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm at.
But it's that
Well,
trade-off.
And I would say it's not only the value of the properties today. If you think about it, that is the majority of the east side of the commercial corridor of Pacific City. So quantifying the overall long-term economic impact to that part of the community, I mean, there's no way for us to do that, but I don't think that should be lost in the conversation either.
Right.
Because a lot of that are those businesses.
I think that you actually hit upon it. With the frustration I have is that I think the ownership of this airport is going to have to change, because I don't think ODAV is they're not going to come back and not have those
Right.
requirements. And I just feel like I feel like I think that's a good study to do, to show the numbers, to show that we
Mhm.
should be spending some time thinking, what's next
Yeah.
if they do? Because it's,
Yeah.
I will prioritize that, and I will do my best to get that to you before Wednesday.
because I think the airport's important too. I want to say that as well. I think we all do. We've all expressed that. But this track that we're on seems untenable for me, because we can't avoid the takings. We can't take the takings risk.
Mm-mm.
That wouldn't be reasonable for us to do that. The state certainly isn't going to do that. So,
I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it's
Thank you
gonna
for
be a
bringing
tough
that up.
conversation.
okay.
You guys have a retirement party to get
Yeah, we
to, and
do.
I'm gonna go back to work and call the Headlight Herald.
Anything else from staff? No? None? Okay, I will adjourn this meeting at 2:58 PM. Thank you.
Perfect.